Hello, everyone. I'm Manis. I'm the outreach team lead for HackIllinois 2022. Just waiting for a couple minutes as one of the uh, meta engineers are going to come and then help run the event. So, um, Yash, you want to take it from here? Yash, you're muted.
Got it. Thanks, Manas. I'm Yash. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Intro to React and Web Development. Um, yeah, let's just give it a couple of minutes and then we can get started. Hopefully, we have more people by then, and we also have my co-host. But yeah.
Fong, the web dev is the React workshop, so it's all in one.
All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Yash. I'm a software engineer at Facebook. I'm also UIC alum. I graduated last May. I majored in computer science and chemistry. I've worked at Meta for about 9 months now. During my time at Meta, I've worked with a couple of teams. I currently work for the business integrations team. We create business apps for small and medium businesses to work and integrate with like different Facebook services. And I've also worked for the search ranking team, worked on projects involving improving ranking for like results and everything. And yeah, that's mostly about it. It's nice to be back at Facebook. Nice to be back at UFI. I really like my time here, so it's good to meet you all virtually. And yeah, let's get started with intro to React and web development. Um, can I get some reactions as to how many people understand web dev or like do know a little about React in general? Like any reactions, maybe a hands up or anything? It looks like quite a few people do already understand about React and web development in general. But let's just take a high level, or let's just take a little while to like understand how web requests and like web development in general works. So this is a flow chart of how things work on the back end when a user browses for a website, right? Let's say a user searches for facebook.com. Your browser basically sends requests to DNS servers, which translate that domain to an IP address, which redirects to a server. The server hosts logic basically to store or generate a website. And basically that is sent as a response to the browser, which then renders the website. What you see on a website is composed of three different elements, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code. There exist different frameworks for both like the server-side scripting languages like Python, PHP, and Node use frameworks like Django, Laravel, and Express.js, whereas like front-end set of things, which like the different libraries for things that work on front end, like there's React, there's AngularJS, and Vue.js. We're going to dig deep into React today. Yeah, so basically your website, like I said, is composed of three components, right? HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML gives the website a structure, what should be a heading, what should be a paragraph, and etc. CSS is responsible for the design, like what colors, what fonts, what positions things fall into. And then JavaScript lastly adds dynamic behavior to things, right? Like if you see a drop down or a navigation, everything that changes on a browser as the website is loading is through JavaScript. And so yeah, basically how does the website load, right? When a web page is loaded, the browser basically creates something called a document object model through JavaScript code or through HTML code. And basically what this does is creates a tree kind of a structure and outlines various HTML components, provides properties to different elements, and gives you a basic kind of an API to interact with HTML code and change the structure of things if you need to, right? So that is what happens initially. And then JavaScript is very powerful in certain ways. It lets you do all different kinds of things to HTML code, CSS code, lets you listen to various events. Like if you click on a button, then JavaScript basically handles what's to be done with that. Maybe you change a color to the button. Maybe you redirect a user to a different website or a different component or a different page on the website, right? So HTML can do all of these things. It's really powerful, but HTML does have a lot of problems given that it was written really long ago. Like, I don't know if a lot of you know about JavaScript, but JavaScript was written and developed in UFI in about 10 days. So yeah, it's a cool fact, but that's that. So like, let me list some problems with JavaScript, right? JavaScript has some limitations, as in it has a little, at least earlier JavaScripts had dependency on the browser. So if you use Mozilla versus like Internet Explorer, you had to write different code for it, which kind of sucks, right? You do want users to like use different browsers and still have the same experience and everything. That's the first thing. Also, there's some bad parts, like bad code. Like you'd expect some things to happen, and JavaScript is notorious for letting other things happen. Like I said, it was written in 10 days. So, and a lot of languages that we see today have been written over a couple of years. So yeah. So like there are basic syntax issues, logic problems. There's a problem with global like variable scoping. Like if you declare an object on a global level, that might or might not work. And it's just confusing in general. Like using loops in JavaScript is kind of difficult. Yeah, that's that. And then thanks to the newer versions of JS, like all of these have kind of gone with like print checkers, ES16, and like strict type checking modes. So it's much better, but it still sucks. Lastly, there is unpredictable code designs, because JavaScript was written is so predated, and people did not expect web to explode as it is today, right? Like not a lot of web applications existed back then. It was mainly like desktop applications and everything, right? So it's kind of complex. People wrote whatever they wanted to write, and that led to like bad examples of code out there. So people basically write very complicated code. It's difficult to understand code, produce new ones. It's basically, it used to be a mess, and it was easy to get confused. Thanks to newer frameworks like React, Angular, Vue.js, and libraries, this problem has been resolved because of like containerization of things, like breaking things down into components and everything. So it's much easier nowadays. So yeah, let's basically look into React now that we understand why React is necessary. So yeah, basically React makes things really flexible, right? React is a library as opposed to a framework. Framework is a blueprint for how applications should be developed, versus React has various developed components, and you can just use them in your code. So it makes things really simple and less redundant. React's API is pretty great and small. Like there's not a lot of things to React, and like everything can basically use the same API. So it provides for rapid development. React also reduced the number of times the DOM would be reloaded. Some earlier frameworks would be, or libraries would basically reload the DOM or like recreate the DOM every time a change happened or a state changed. But yeah, React basically virtualized the DOM and like helped reduce the number of updates, and that made JavaScript really faster, or like just development on the web and like loading of websites really faster. Then lastly, React is very easy to test. React eliminates the need for traditional UI browser testing. Like you don't need to test React on a browser. You can write unit testing, or you can use frameworks like Jest and everything to test React through command line. You don't really need a browser, which makes things faster again. And lastly, React is heavily supported by organizations out there, right? Like a lot of Meta developers build for React. Like React is actively supported by Facebook and all of its full-time, or like few of its full-time employees. So yeah, if anything breaks, then we are here to fix it, and like we keep it going, basically. Yeah, basically that was my part. Let's see if Benjamin's still around. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it. If not, I can just continue with the workshop. Any questions? All right, let's move on then. So Benjamin was supposed to introduce himself here, but let's just move ahead. Let's understand React from scratch.
Yes, there's a question in the chat.
Oh, okay, let's do that then. Can you just unmute the person who's trying to ask the question? It's kind of difficult to like see the chats right now.
I was just asking, why do some places prefer Java?
Interesting. So Java and Python have their own advantages, right? Like, so is this for like scripting purposes versus like what? Can you elaborate on your question? So Java is used for different use cases. Python is used for a broader set of use cases. Like Python is really used a lot for like scripting. Java is a little complicated for scripting. Like if you want to run a website on like the server on a Java, if you want to run a Java server, it's pretty complicated, honestly. Like the API is not pretty, it's not easy to use, but Java is faster. Python takes a lot of time to like run. So if someone's looking for like high frequency work and like is trying to optimize for performance, then they'd probably use Java over Python. But Python is an easier API to incorporate into your web stack or like tech stack in general, has better frameworks like Django or Flutter and everything of that sort. So I think that's why people prefer Python over Java, or yeah, but people prefer Java over Python just for the performance, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Manas, I think Ben is trying to get on call. Can you let him in?
I've disabled the waiting room, so he could just hop in.
Yeah, he's not able to join for some reason. Let's just go ahead and see if he's able to join. But yeah, let's take a deeper dive into React and see how React is composed. So basically React consists of various components, right? One of them is JSX, which is basically anything you write in JavaScript can be converted into React code. Basically declare variables like in here. And then you can basically combine variables and store HTML code in the variables. So that is what Java JSX allows you to do. And basically it's a syntax extension for JavaScript. It's written to be used with React. JSX code looks a lot like HTML or XML. So that makes it easier to like integrate JavaScript with like HTML code, I guess. Another advantage of using React is you can embed expressions into JSX. This is useful for injecting JS values you want to display in UI. It's also useful when rendering a list of elements, as you can map an array of values to a JSX element to render. So let's say you're trying to render a list of components that you fetch from the server, right? It's pretty easy to use a map function to basically create multiple components as opposed to like manually feeding content. So that's that. And basically components are the smallest building blocks of React apps. Like all React apps are composed of various components. And like basically, let's say you have a div somewhere in your HTML file. We can call the root DOM, not because everything inside is managed by the root DOM. So you can easily refer to it through IDs and everything. And yeah, to render a React element into root DOM, you basically pass that to the render react.dom.render, and basically renders that for you on the website. Like I said before, React has kind of abstracted the DOM and like does not render every time you update an object. It only does it when it's necessary, and this state diagram kind of explains how that happens. Moving on to components. The benefit of using components, is that it lets you split the UI into dependent reusable pieces and think about pieces in isolation as opposed to like everything together. Like you don't want all of your JavaScript code to interact with each other, right? Like components is a better way to nest logic into like smaller chunks that can be reused. Basically that. So yeah, this is just an example of the component in JavaScript. Another thing that components allow for is state management. Like everything on front end is managed by a state, right? Like there exists one HTML function, you take a certain action like an event, you click on an object and that changes the state to another object. And based on this state, you render a different thing on the front end, right? So that is basically how you manage data in React. It's all state management. Yeah, this basically explains how mounting, updating, and unmounting works. So basically, when you render, the constructor generates the code. It's then rendered. When you click on a component or take any action, hover over it, it basically updates the DOM and references. And then finally, when everything's done, you can unmount the component when you change the state. That's that. So let's go through an example of how to build a notification bell using UI, using an iterative UI building versus declarative way in React. So this is an initial state, right? Like just a regular bell icon. And then you might want to add a badge to say 8 based on the number of notifications.
Hey, Yash.
Yeah.
I'm on if you want me to take over.
Sure.
Yeah, let me see if I can share my screen. Give me 1 second.
Benjamin, do you want me to just share the screen and you can tell me when to move, and I can do that if you want.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think yeah, you can do that actually. Can you go back to my intro slide and I can just do a quick intro?
Sure.
Cool.
Is this visible?
I'm not seeing it. Let me see.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could try sharing one more time.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I just joined in. I'm Ben Holland. I was a computer engineering major who graduated in 2018. I'm a front-end engineer at Meta, and I've worked there for about 3.5 years. I've worked on Oculus, and now I'm working on Messenger and Instagram direct messages. I really enjoyed my time at Illinois, so I'm really happy to be back virtually, at least, to talk to you guys about web development in React. And then you can skip to the further in the slides now. Thanks. Yeah, so as Josh was saying, we're going to go through a quick little example of why React makes building UIs really easy. And it primarily has to do with declarative UI programming. You can see in this slide, there's 3 different UI states, which you might see at like the Facebook navigation bar. You would see like the little notification badge. These are different UI states based on like how many notifications you might have. Like you might have 0, which would be the bottom left, or 8 on the top, or you might have a lot like 99 plus. You might have to add some more UI around that. So I'm just going to go through an example of how you would build this without React and why React makes it a lot easier. Yeah, so if you were to build this without React and you try to do it imperatively, which means to do it in steps by altering the UI in steps, you would have to, if you had 8 notifications, you'd say, okay, I need to add this badge UI, and then I need to set that text of the badge UI to 8. And you go next slide. Or if you have 99 notifications, you have to add the badge UI, you have to add the fire, and then you need to set the text badge to 99 plus. So this is kind of how it would look if you kind of do this imperatively, like before React. You have to do a bunch of these checks to see if like the UI already exists. Otherwise, you add it. So for example, if we've already added the fire UI, which is the second if statement, if it has fire, then you need to add it. Otherwise, you remove it, and then you keep doing these like kind of nested checks, and it usually gets really out of hand once you have like more than 2 or 3 UI states. You have all these kind of nested checks, and you're trying to imperatively update the UI and also check what the current state of the UI is. It can get really confusing. And it's really hard to like kind of understand this if you're reading this code. So let's just see if we can do it a different way. So this is an example of like some example React code. Instead of kind of updating the UI in steps, we just return the UI we want to see based on the state. So the count is like the number of notifications. And if it's 0, then we just return that bell. And if it's less than 99, we just return the count plus the badge. So we're actually not like calling into these APIs to update the UI. We're returning the UI itself based on the state, which makes it a lot easier to read. If you remember in the first slide, there was like 3 different UI states, and you can see there's like 3 different kind of branches this code can go into. So it's very one-to-one with what the UI looks like. You can go next slide. Yeah, you can see there's the 3 different UI states: the no notifications, less than 99, and then 99 plus. Yeah, that's basically React. And UI is primarily composed of these components. So for example, we could turn that badge into a notifications component. So we could reuse this across the site. And once we had this in its own kind of encapsulated component, we can start to compose it with other different badges. So for example, the Facebook nav bar might have 3 of these components side by side, all being passed in these different props. I think that's it. And we can do any Q&A now, if you have any questions.
So is React dynamic or static in terms of web server?
Did you say dynamic or static in terms of what?
Like web servers.
Not sure I quite understand. What do you mean by web servers?
Yeah, it says a programming language is like React sort of more dynamic based or static based.
It's dynamic. So JS is all dynamic. It's compiled on the fly.
Okay.
So I guess like I'm super new to this. I've heard like the term React before, but I never really fully understood it. So if I understand this correctly, React interacts with like your HTML and CSS elements. Is that correct?
That's correct. So usually before React, you would have like separate files for like your HTML and your JS, and
Yeah.
React kind of puts them all together into like one file, including the styles. So it's easier to kind of write these components and have like the logic and what it actually displays in the same component. And so it's a little bit easier to read. So you have to switch between these HTML and like JS files. So it's like the UI and then also the logic for the UI in the same file.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. Looks like we got some in the chat too. I'll try to answer those. Does Facebook engineering internships use the React framework? I think it depends what you're working on. Sometimes you'll be doing like mobile or server-side programming. But there's definitely like a lot of React use in Facebook. So there's a good chance that you will probably use React if you're working anything to do with the web. And even on like iOS and Android, we do have like React Native, which is also like using React. So it kind of depends on what your project is for your internship.
So in the beginning, I think Josh showed some like an example where there was also Angular and Vue.js. Are they similar, or like when would we like? Yeah, I think Brian's asking the same question I wanted to ask. How do you choose which one you want for a project? Like, where does React fare better than maybe Angular or Vue, or is it the same thing? They're all different same name for different frameworks.
So I know Vue is very similar in terms of that. I think it's just, so like usually with these web frameworks, it's just like MVP. And I know Angular does all like the model view and the, what's it called? I forgot the P. But for React and Vue, it's just the view. So it just handles how the UI is rendering. It doesn't handle like data fetching or data storage and stuff like that. You need additional code to do that. So it kind of depends. I'm not really sure like which to recommend, but because they kind of serve different purposes. I think Angular is more, it includes more in the framework.
Cool, thanks.
Benjamin, we have another question from Saad, who asks if we use TypeScript with React projects at all at Facebook, at Meta.
I know primarily we use Flow because we build that in-house. And a lot of like our other libraries like Relay heavily rely on Flow. But I think there is some TypeScript use, but I know that it's primarily Flow at Facebook.
Kim asks, what courses did you take to prepare for your industry job? Did you feel well prepared as a UIC alum? What were your favorite classes? Benjamin, you want to go first and then I can go.
Sure. So courses that prepared me, obviously data structures, that's super crucial. I also took like the VR class, which was really interesting and kind of led me to work at Oculus. And they don't really do a lot of front-end programming classes. I know there's one, but I don't think I took that one, but that would also probably be useful. I didn't get a chance to take databases, but I think that would be useful if you're trying to work on the server side. And I also really like distributed systems, but I don't do too much of that, but it's sometimes useful thinking about it that way. I definitely felt well prepared. Yeah, the classes here are really good and the projects that they give you are really good too. My favorite classes, I was ECE, so I really liked 391, even though it was really brutal. 411 was good too. And then distributed systems and the VR class were probably my favorites.
Cool. Yeah, I have taken similar classes. I think 225 and 241 were my personal favorites. Also, this depends on what you're trying to do, right? Like if you want to be a full stack developer, then probably databases, web development, and all these classes will help you the most. If you're looking for an ML position, though, you should take the applied machine learning or the machine learning classes. They're pretty nice too. I really like those. Yeah, classes at UIC are generally pretty great. They prepare you well for what it's to work outside. So yeah. Next question. So what language is mostly used for backend development these days? I know that JavaScript is used more on the client side. That is true. I think Facebook uses PHP or a version of PHP called Hack for backend development internally, with like Python, C++, everything, all of these languages are pretty commonly used. Go language is also taking up a lot of it's mostly for DevOps, but some people also script using Go. So yeah, basically these languages are probably the most commonly used, but it's difficult to say. Benjamin, you want to add to that?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think Hack is primarily used on like Facebook side, and then there's a lot of Python use on Instagram, and there's also a lot of C++ too.
Another question from Kaylee is, does Facebook primarily use JavaScript? Yeah,
You want to answer? You got that one?
sure. I mean, I don't think like in its truest form anyone uses JavaScript, or like at least Facebook does not, or Meta does not use JavaScript anymore. Like used React, which kind of abstracts away the JavaScript part of things, and like so. Yeah, kind of. We use JavaScript, but not really.
Yeah, so JavaScript is like mainly for the front end side, and we use it for like all of React and all of Flow and Relay is all JavaScript. And I found that like when I joined Facebook, I didn't know React at all. I just knew JavaScript. And like when they interviewed me, they didn't really test if I knew like React specifically. They just wanted to know if I knew kind of other front end fundamentals and like if I had a good grasp of like JavaScript as a language. So if you're like kind of looking to go into like front end, I recommend just trying to learn JavaScript as a language first, because it'll make learning like these other frameworks like React a little bit easier.
It's true. Next question is from Deepak. He's asking if React is used in building the metaverse. Benjamin, since you did work on the Oculus team, why don't you take this?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, if you like boot up your Oculus right now, a lot of the UI you use to like launch apps or share things with friends, it's a lot of it's built with React. We use like a custom version called React VR. And we do that so that like developers like me can actually develop things for VR. When I joined Facebook, I didn't think I was going to be able to join Oculus because I didn't have like a lot of game development experiments. But there's a lot of teams that are using React so they can hire developers to build out the metaverse instead of just being able to hire game developers.
Any other questions?
There's one. Did I study front end? I'm doing a project right now that needs front end and I'm screwed. I didn't really technically study front end. I just kind of learned it through my internships. A lot of my courses, since I was ECE, were like much more low level. So it was kind of something I had to like figure out on my own. But I think that like you gradually learn things in your courses that make you better at like kind of learning new technologies and languages and stuff like that.
All right, Kim has another question. Did you do any undergrad research? Benjamin, I haven't done any research. Do you want to take that up if you have?
I didn't do any research, but I did do part-time internships in the research park, which is south of campus. There's a lot of companies that are hiring like people to code down there, and I think it's a really great opportunity and a great way to like earn some money. So I did internships throughout part-time internships throughout my 4 years there.
Fair enough. We have a question from Abdullah. He asks if React is also helpful in game design / development.
I think so. I think that like there's a lot of people who do build games of React. And there is some experimentation of actually building like 3D games with React too. So there's definitely some people doing it, and it's a little bit of an easier stepping stone than trying to build something like with Unity or Unreal, because those are definitely complex. So if you're looking to kind of build something fun, a little bit quicker, and you don't have to wait for like dev load times, then React might be a good choice. Cool. Some person says, Kaylee says that they just launched a new game studies and design degree. Yeah, that would have been definitely interesting. I would have definitely tried to take some courses there. one thing that I saw that as I was graduating, it was that they were trying to kind of bridge the divide between like the art students and the engineering students. And I really think that's like super valuable. As a front-end engineer, I wish I could have taken more like graphic design courses when I was in college. Because I work with designers like on a daily basis, and it's really nice to be able to converse with them, and vice versa.
Abdul asks what coding languages are the most commonly used for game development. Yeah, I think there are a wide spectrum of languages that are used. I interned once with a game development company and they use C# because they were using Unity, and I think Unreal is based off C++. I think Facebook uses a lot of C++ for Oculus development too, apart from React VR. But yeah, probably Benjamin is a better person to ask about this.
Yeah, so I think you hit on it. I think it's the main players are Unity and Unreal, and that's C# and C++. Yeah, and I think we use both at Oculus, and we have to support both just because developers develop different games for both Unreal and Unity.
Does Go have the ability to replace C++ for game dev? I don't know about that. Benjamin?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's kind of a question to see what the game engine supports. So Unreal, I know, is very C++ focused. And I'm not sure if there's a game engine that supports Go. Maybe Godot. That's another open source game engine. But yeah, I'm not sure if you can actually use a different language if like with these game engines. All right. We have, is metastock a concern for your future career? I'm not too concerned about it. I mean, yes, it does suck that it's tanked, but I don't know, I kind of view it as like a long-term thing. So I'm not like that reactionary. I didn't like sell it all off immediately. So yes, it is kind of concerning, but what are you gonna do?
That's fair. I have nothing to add. Any other questions? I think we're almost out of time. Yeah.
Is Express.js widely used in the backend in industry as much as PHP or Python? I'm not exactly sure. I think PHP is pretty common and Ruby on Rails is pretty common. I think Node.js is also common too. So I'm more of a front end guy, so I don't really know which companies use which and how much usage there is. But yeah, I feel like you can probably learn one and learn another. There's probably pretty similar concepts between these backend frameworks.
Have you guys met Mark Zuckerberg? I did meet him like on multiple occasions. I used to work in the same building as him, so I ran into him on the first day of my internship, and then he also hosts a lot of in-person Q&As back when things were in person. So yeah, you could potentially meet him every Tuesday once things go back, or Thursday once things go back to normal. But yeah. Ben,
Yeah, I have not met him. I've only seen him from afar at his Q&A. I did meet the Oculus co-founders before they left though, so that was cool.
Yeah, execs at Meta in general are like pretty approachable, like especially like when you intern, that's the best time to like meet these people. Like you can just message them and like they're pretty receptive and everything. So yeah, feel free to like message your skips or like VPs in your org and everything. They're all great people, and as interns you can basically get away with anything. So yeah.
Any general advice for us college kids? Anything you wish, knew, or did? I would say getting that first internship is really hard. I remember being so hard, and I was just trying to find some kind of position that would let me code, because I had no coding experience. But like once you get it, you'll start to get like better and better opportunities, and it'll be exciting. But just getting that first one is really hard. What else?
I think like involving yourself in as many like clubs and everything is probably good. Like you want to involve yourself in many clubs that are relevant to what you want to do. Like I would join Hack for Impact, maybe consulting at OTCR or like IBC, or like anything that's relevant, right? Like I think all of these go a long way. You do get a lot of relevant experience while you work on these projects and everything. So yeah, I think I would do that if I were back in college. But yeah.
I think another missing thing that they don't really emphasize too much in engineering degrees is like being able to write. I think that's something you have to do a lot when you're working at these companies that I definitely was lacking when I first joined. Being able to write and communicate like to larger and larger groups is really important. I know that they make you take some business writing courses, and I actually found that like that was one of the most valuable courses I took for like my day-to-day like actual things I do. What else? Just enjoy your time at Illinois. I think you get to take so many different courses and like crazy interesting topics from like world leaders in it that like once you join like the industry, you don't have as much opportunity to kind of like branch out and just take a bunch of different like random topics that interest you. So enjoy it while it lasts. What else? Do we do a lot of presenting or public speaking in your positions? I think it's kind of up to you. I think that people like to see, or like, I think it's a really good skill to improve on. Because even if you're just an engineer on your team, like you have to give some tech talks sometime to explain how things work if you're trying to move off a team or just trying to kind of build a better understanding of like what you're working on with your coworkers. So I think it's important that you at least try to get some practice with it. I'm definitely not the best, but I definitely try to do it at least like once or twice per year.
Danielle asks if what stage in your academic career did you obtain your first CS internship? I think my first internship in the US was the spring semester of my junior year. I was a winter intern at Facebook just before the pandemic started. So I was kind of lucky that way. I got to intern in person. But yeah, that was my first internship in the US. Ben?
Yeah, my first one, it was my freshman summer. It was not glamorous. It was like this 5-person startup, which eventually folded. But it didn't really matter, right? Because it just got me into the door at coding and gave me some experience that I could put on my resume that I actually knew how to code a little bit. So it really doesn't have to be a glamorous first position, but I would just try to get it so you're actually like doing the work you actually want to do in the future, which is if it's coding, it's coding. If it's something else, it's something else.
Abdullah asks, do you often work in groups for coding, or is it a more individual based thing? I think we do scope a lot of projects and like tech, like system design in groups, but I think coding is more of an individual exercise. We do a lot of diff reviews, and there's a lot of feedback that you get from other people. But yeah, I think that's the extent of it. I think it's a little different just because things are remote for now. Maybe it's a little different when things are in person. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of it's kind of asynchronous, where like you'll put up some code and you'll have your coworker review it, and then so it's a little bit like that. Sometimes I've had it where if things are coming in, like you have a deadline coming up and things aren't working, I'll like just grab another engineer and we'll just kind of pair debug it. And that usually works out really well. And there's a lot of knowledge transfer that happens and you get things done quicker. So I'm not afraid to like just go and pull someone in. We just kind of work together until we figure it out.
Yeah, a lot of collaboration does happen. I'm still very early in my career, and I do learn a lot from like people in my team. They do have a lot of things to say about code design in general. Uh, I learn about new coding patterns and frameworks every day. So yeah, you do end up learning a lot from your teammates. So in that way, I'd say it's really collaborative and everything.
To answer Kaylee's question, yeah, I'll share my screen with the QR code so you guys can get your points.
How important was GPA for you? I can go. My GPA was not good and it didn't really matter too much. There are some companies that definitely asked for it, but a lot of them didn't. And like once you kind of have some internships kind of on your resume, it starts to matter even less. So yeah, I think it depends on like what you're going for. I think if you're trying to go to grad school, it's more important. Or if you're trying to go to like more of a research position, then that could weigh more. But I think for a lot of these software engineering roles, it's going to matter a little bit less.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think people should be bothered about their GPAs unless you do plan to go to grad school. It really does not matter. Like as long as you show some relevant experience, or like if you do keep trying to like do different things, doesn't have to be internships. It could be like great side projects or anything. I think you're good. GPA only matters after a certain point. Yeah, so it's all good. Since we learn so many different coding languages, how does one make sure that they don't get rusty on other coding languages that they don't use often? I can answer this real quick. I think like a lot of these programming languages have a very similar like core, right? Like syntax might vary from like language to language, but essentially they all do the same thing. And as long as you understand how data structures work and algorithms work, it's pretty easy to like switch between languages. You just have to look up syntax, which shouldn't take long. As long as you develop that muscle with like data structures and algorithms in general, it doesn't really matter what coding language you use.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I found it kind of important to maybe like focus on one for a bit and kind of learn it deeply. And that way you get further into like what capabilities a language has. And then, so if you kind of like switch between them a lot, you're not really kind of deeply learning the different capabilities of the programming language. And like kind of deeply learning one kind of forces you to like, I don't know. It just makes you. I feel like it makes learning another language easier because you're like, oh, I already learned this concept in this language. I just need to figure out why it's different in this other language.
Right. We can take like maybe a last question or a couple of questions if people have any. Otherwise, yeah, that's it from our side. Otherwise, all right. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining in. I hope you guys learned something or took away something from this. But yeah, thanks for being a great audience. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you to Yash and Ben for hosting the event and talking about a little bit about React and front-end development and also what you guys do at Meta. So that was really cool to hear. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to ask.
There's one. How do I practice for technical interviews? Leak code. And actually practicing in person with like a whiteboard is also important because it's pretty different if you're like typing versus on a whiteboard. So get a couple of rounds on a whiteboard would be useful. All right. Thank you guys so much. Hope you enjoy the rest of your time at Illinois. All right. See ya.
Everyone, see ya.